Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Writing Podcast. I'm your host Adam, and as always, I'm here with my co-host Lindsay Broker. And we've got a good one here for you today. We have paranormal and fantasy romance author Christine Pope on the show. Christine, welcome to the show.
Hi, Adam. Hi, Lindsay.
So we'll kind of start out like we always like to at the beginning. So as far as writing or writing as a career goes, how did you, where'd you start, and how did you start going towards self-publishing stuff traditionally?
I was one of those people who wrote from a really early age. I think I wrote my first full-length novel when I was like 11 and a half, and it was some horrible Star Wars pastiche type of thing. And I studied creative writing in college, but back then self-publishing wasn't, it didn't even exist. And I wrote a few novels, and I just sort of trunked them and went into the working world and did all that. And I had a really long period where I did not write a thing. And then I discovered fanfic, and I started writing fanfic just for fun because I felt like, at least when I was doing that, people were reading it and responding to it, and I really liked the interaction with the readers. And then I started thinking, maybe I should try writing some of my own stuff and submitting it. And so I knew, because I was always one of those people who sort of like to write in between genres or stuff that didn't feel completely mainstream, that I wasn't even going to bother submitting to big agents or big publishers. And so I submitted to a small ebook publisher, and to my enormous shock, they accepted my book. And so they published that one. It was a contemporary romance called Fringe Benefits, and then they published another paranormal romance novella called Playing with Fire, and then finally my last book with them, Sympathy for the Devil, which was another paranormal romance. And during this period, that was in 2010, things were just starting to, I was just starting to hear rumblings about, being able to self-publish, and I sort of started investigating it. And right now, I honestly can't say exactly how I got to that point, or how I found the Kindle boards, or K-boards as they're called now. But I started hanging out on there, just sort of lurking, and then I finally made an account and decided I would write a science fiction romance novella based on Beauty and the Beast that was called Breath of Life. And so that was my first self-published work, and I put it up on through Amazon in June of 2011. And it actually sold some copies, and I was shocked because then I didn't know anything about marketing it or anything. It was just sort of like, let's see what happens. And it wasn't an breakthrough out of the box seller, but at least it sold some copies, and it encouraged me to keep writing. And so I just started writing more things and putting them on there. I had no plan. I just was writing whatever I felt like and putting it out there. But I was seeing that even those really modest, unfocused efforts were doing much better for me financially than what I was earning through the e-publisher. And so from then, I just decided, well, they have these books of mine for 3 years, and I'll just have to wait to get those rights back. But otherwise, I'm just going to start writing my own stuff and putting it first mostly through Amazon, and then I started branching out. I think Barnes & Noble was the second place that I started putting my books up, but that's kind of how I eased into it.
Awesome. And you said, so when you started putting work out for others to read, pretty much it was fan fiction to start with. So what years was that when you were doing the fan fiction online?
Oh gosh, it had to have been, I want to say like 2007, 2008, somewhere around there. And I put things on fanfiction.net, and I was also writing Star Wars fanfic, so that was going up on the force.net's fanfic board in the forums there. And I did a bunch of Star Wars, I did a bunch of Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and a few other smaller fandoms, and it was a lot of fun, and it got my writing legs back, because I seriously hadn't written a thing except emails and memos to people in my work life for almost 7 years.
Right. And so you said you were getting people reading it there. This may branch over a little bit into some stuff that Lindsay's going to talk about, but did you post, or was there a way to let those people know when you did eventually publish a book, or do you know if any of those came to start reading that stuff with girls?
I honestly don't know, because I wasn't super vocal about it. I didn't go into my fanfiction.net profile and say, oh, by the way, I'm now writing as Christine Pope. I did mention that I was starting to write my own original stuff that was being published, but that was about it. I don't know how they found me. I mean, it's probably not that difficult to connect my fanfiction handle with me, because, the name is similar. But I had a couple people come asking about a couple of works that I had pulled down for various reasons and saying, oh, I really love that. Do you still have a copy? And one of them I did, but the other one I was like 4 computers ago, and it was just gone. So I had to say, I'm really sorry, but it's just, yeah, it's gone forever.
And so on the public websites where you post fan fiction and things, are you still active in any of those? I know that the big one recently, not just for fan fiction though, is Wattpad, and people have had success stories there. Do you post any of your stuff on there, or? I
haven't. I thought about it, but I just hadn't gotten around to it. And also, my feeling with Wattpad is it seems to be a younger audience, and most, from what I can tell, looking at my demographics on Facebook and on my website, etc., it seems like my main audience is between 28 and 40, somewhere in there. So, and Wattpad does tend to be a little bit younger than that. So I'm not sure if my material is the best fit for Wattpad, I guess. I could try and see what happens, but there's only so many hours in the day.
Right, yeah. And I know I've heard some people, just go in there and they just post some chapters of their books anyway, not write new material. So I was wondering if you had tried that. But so I was about to get started asking you some things about Facebook, but then I think I'd be stepping on some stuff that Lindsay's going to speak about. So I'll try to loop back around. So talk about your writing itself. So you said you predominantly write in multiple romance genres, right? Is there any other genres, or just variations of romance?
Just variations of romance. I have ongoing series that are paranormal romance, science fiction romance, and fantasy romance. And because they're different enough from each other, I haven't really felt the need to go outside the romance genre, because there's so many things for me to explore there, and I like my happy endings. I'm not a doom and gloom writer, so I like it that there's kind of that shape to the story, even though you can do a lot, leading up to it, obviously.
You said after taking creative writing in college, you went into the normal workforce. I guess you would say normal instead of writing. As everyone knows, writing as a profession is very abnormal. So
yeah.
So when you were starting to transition over, what did your writing time look like then, or your writing process? And are you full time now? And if so, how has it changed since then?
What happened was I worked in publishing for a long time, in magazine publishing, and then, for a variety of reasons, a lot of magazines were getting bought by bigger companies, and people were getting phased out and all this kind of stuff. So I sort of bounced around, but I did end up back in magazine publishing after just doing some freelancing for a while. And I was lucky enough, this is going to sound awful, but the position I had for a couple of years as a copy editor, they were kind of like, you can do whatever you want with your time, as long as when stuff comes across your desk, you do that first and make sure the workflow keeps going. So I actually wrote complete novels while I was at work, because there was time to do it. And which I know a lot of people don't have that luxury, but I did. So that kind of gave me a boost to get back into it. And then when that job ended, and I worked in city government in California for a while, it was the same thing. They were like, if you have extra time and you want to write, that's fine, as long as, you know, the real work gets done first. So I was able to do it a little bit there, and then I would take it home and I'd just work on the weekends or an hour or so after work. Luckily, I lived in the same town where I was working, so I didn't have a commute eating up hours of my day, which also makes a big difference. So all those things kind of contributed, and then eventually there was a change in management there, and it was not a good environment, so I quit and decided to start freelancing. And so I worked as a freelance editor and graphic designer, had my own company for several years, and it was doing really well, and then the writing started to take off, and I'm still actually doing, technically I should be a full-time writer right now, but I have repeat clients whom I really love working with, and so I don't advertise, I don't seek out new work, but when they come to me with projects, I try really hard to fit them in if I can. And I have a list of backup people that I can send them to if I don't have the time, but luckily that's only happened a few times. So, because I'm a full-time writer, but I can't write 8 hours a day, my head would explode. I mean, I like to write about 4 to 5 hours a day, probably, and in the afternoon. I'm not a morning writer. I don't know how some people can do it. My brain's not in that spot in the morning. So that's when I do all of my email answering and marketing stuff and all that kind of thing, so that the slate's clean when I want to sit down with my laptop in the afternoon.
I'm with you on that. I'm a nighttime writer too. I write like before bed, so I could not in the morning for sure. So I know you said you write 4 to 5 hours a day, and is that writing and editing time? And you know, how many words do you shoot for? Do you have goals or a writing plan set out? Or?
I try to write 4,000 words a day, so it's about 1,000 words an hour. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little less, but I found for a while I was really trying to push it, like I've got to do 5,000 words a day, I've got to do 6,000 words today, and I could just feel myself getting tired. So 4,000 words a day works well for me. That's still enough if you're writing 5 or 6 days a week to get out, you know, a first draft of a full-length novel once a month, basically. If I have editing to do, I actually do that in the morning. I have no problem with editing in the morning or earlier in the afternoon, but the raw writing, I need to wait until about 2:30 or 3 to get started on that.
Right, and so you said that you had done some graphic design work, or that you're still doing it. So does that mean you're doing your own covers as well, or?
Yes, I do my own covers, and I do all my own print and ebook formatting, because I've been doing that in various capacities in previous jobs. And I was really lucky, like way back when I first started in magazine publisher, I had great art directors who basically taught me how to use Photoshop. So that was another thing I would do when I was, you know, when things were slow, I would just play with Photoshop and learn it, and the same way how I learned InDesign too. So that's how I do all my print books now.
Awesome, yeah, and for anyone that's listening instead of watching, if you go to the website for this episode, thewritingpodcast.com/4, you can actually see 4 examples of our book covers below that post, and they definitely don't look homemade, so I had to ask you that. So.
I do my own website too, because I taught myself some of that, and then Adobe came out with Muse in the last couple of years, and I love it because it lets me just design a website without having to worry about coding, because that's so not what I do. My husband's great at it, but I'm not.
And one last thing, I guess, then we'll turn it over to the marketing stuff, which I know is what 90% of the people want, is how do I sell my book? So, are you team plot or team pantser?
Oh, I'm a total pantser. Well, okay, I'm probably 90% pantser. I tend to, when I sit down to write a book, I know how it starts. I know a couple of scenes that I want to be in it in the middle, and I almost always know how it ends, even if I don't have the exact, words in my head. But other than that, I just let it flow. I'm very right brain, and I think that's more of a right brain way to do it. I don't get into the fights about it because it's completely a different process for every person. Everybody's brain works differently. But for me, I like that because I like going on this voyage of discovery with my characters. And sometimes things come up that I didn't even think of, but because it's been stewing in my subconscious for days or weeks or whatever, it comes up with interesting angles and things that I might not have thought of if I just sat down and tried to plot out a whole book from beginning to end, in advance. So, and also I tend to, even though it sounds like I write books really quickly, I've generally been thinking about them, thinking about the main characters, hearing their voices in my head for weeks or months a lot of the time before I actually sit down to write it. So by the time I do it, it flows pretty fast.
Right, and one of the big complaints, I'm in the middle, kind of like you are, but one of the big complaints about when people do not plot out is that they get stuck. So you don't have that problem very often, or how do you work around those problems when you hit them?
You know what? I don't get stuck. I can't remember the last time I really got hung up on something and didn't know what was going to happen next. If I just sat down and let it come out, a lot of times what I do when I'm actually writing, or actually most of the time what I do is I go back and I read what I wrote the day before and I do some light editing of it. And then I start from there, so it's fresh in my head, and things occur to me as I'm reading it, like, oh, okay. But I almost always know when I'm sitting down to write again what that first scene is going to be, and if I don't know exactly what the scenes after it might be in that particular writing session. So, yeah, I've never written myself into a corner where I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. So, fingers crossed.
Yeah, hopefully we didn't jinx you. So, and it's funny, last week when we talked to Wayne Stinnett in the interview, he said sort of the same thing, that he has no idea what's going to happen, really, just a rough idea, and he just gives it over to his main character and lets him do whatever. So, sounds pretty similar.
Yeah, I think it's a very similar process, and it's for me it's more fun. I mean, I think for some people they like to know exactly what's going to happen, so they're not stressing. But I like that. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, so.
Right. So you get to experience sort of like how your readers would. So that's kind of cool. So.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing I thought of during that, I promise, Lindsay, you're going to get to talk soon. So. You said you went to college for creative writing. I know a lot of people, I've seen it asked a lot, not so much on like the Kindle boards, places like that, but in the real world I have people ask, did you go to school to write or whatnot? And it seems like few people did, but do you think that has helped a lot, or is that a lot of that stuff you just kind of thrown away? Or?
Well, it wasn't my major. I minored in it. My major was equally useful. It was medieval history. Which was a really fun major, but you get out in the real world and so I don't know. I think the one thing that I was really lucky in, I was at UC Irvine, and they had some great people there when I was taking those classes who were really open to people wanting to write genre fiction. There wasn't any of that snobby literary thing that you hear horror stories about sometimes in college creative writing programs. I never got that. They were very, very encouraging and nurturing, and so I really appreciated that part of it because I never felt this need to like go out and write the great American novel or whatever. I just wanted to tell stories, which is, what I'm doing now.
All right, cool. Yeah, that's basically the only stories that I've heard is, like you said, the horror stories where they're like, this is the only way to write. It has to be true literature. So.
No, they were much more flexible at UC Irvine, so thank you for that, UCI.
Yeah, because they're definitely watching, for sure. All right, Lindsay, find out how we sell some paranormal books.
All right. Hey, Christine. Yay.
Hi.
Well, you probably don't know, that I write science fiction romance now under my pen name. So I actually first saw you because you're in the also bots for my pen name stuff.
Oh, that's fun.
So I got to ask you all about the science fiction romances, but I'm actually curious if you could tell me kind of about all of your series and like what you find the easiest to market or what sells best without a lot of marketing, maybe.
The series thing is really funny because when I first started self-publishing, I was like, I don't want to write series. I just want to write whatever, you know. And then I found out the hard way that that was not smart. And so I started going into writing series, and both my science fiction romance series and my fantasy romance series are very, they're connected by a world, but each book is a separate entity with its own story and its own happily ever after. And while there are mentions of events from previous books and later books, etc., you can read them on their own without having to have read the entire series. The science fiction romance books have a little bit more of an overarching backstory in terms of the politics of the setup of the world those are written in. But again, you don't have to have read them all, if, you know, or even read them in order necessarily. The paranormal romance, the Witches of Cleopatra Hill books particularly, I did something different with the first 3 books in that series, in that I envisioned that trilogy as a tight, cohesive unit that has one overarching theme or, you know, thing that needs to be resolved over the course of the 3 books, and then books 1 and 2 have cliffhangers, which I had never done before, and I'd heard people say, "Oh my God, I hate cliffhangers," or people are gonna, you know, give you bad reviews for cliffhangers, and I just like, but this is the way I imagined it in my head, so I just needed to tell the story that way, and they're by far my best-selling books. So obviously, not everybody hates cliffhangers.
Yeah, definitely. I've kind of wrestled with that myself, jumping into the romance. You know, I've always done kind of epic fantasy or steampunk before, where the story spans like 5 books, and it's just natural that you're going to have the same characters in book after book, and it's a continuing thing. So it is easy to get people to read them if they like the first one. You know, with romance, you expect happily ever after at the end, and probably not a sequel with those characters. Do you find it challenging to get people that like read first book to go on and try the second, third book in the series of the ones that weren't designed as a serial series thing?
It's a little bit more difficult. You know, I'm the first person to admit that I am not an organized marketer at all. I mean, I know people who have spreadsheets and they're like, I've promoted this book here and I'm going to do it here again in 3 months, or, you know, and they have it all broken up, and I am just awful at that. And that's like one of my resolutions for 2015 is to get more organized so I can really tell what's working for me or not. I've worked pretty hard on getting my mailing list going and being active on my Facebook page and that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I get the word out, you know, about new books in those series. And I do have, you know, whenever a new one comes out, it always does, you know, it's not like a New York Times bestseller or anything, but in terms of my sales, they do well. You know, people keep coming back for them, even though there's not anything completely left hanging. And I've had some readers say that they read all of my series, that they're not just in the paranormal or just in the science fiction romance or whatever. They read all of them, which is really nice to hear, because you always wonder how much crossover you're really getting.
Right. I think a lot of us geeky types, you know, we like the fantasy and the science fiction, so maybe that's not as much of a stretch as if you were writing contemporary thrillers over here on the side. I don't know.
Right, exactly. It's true. It's all speculative in some kind of way, just because that's my reading taste. I was never that into just strictly contemporary romance or anything. I wanted some kind of different angle to it, which is why I write it.
Yeah, I always kind of sneered at romance because sometimes there wouldn't be enough going on. I'm like, I need there to be a body in the basement or a monster stalking them or something. Actually, we were wondering how many books do you actually have out? You were talking about being able to write one in a month. Where are you at now?
The one I just finished writing the first draft this Monday is number 25. So, and that's a new, which is a Cleopatra Hill book, and that'll be coming out in March.
Wow,
So,
she very prolific there.
I try to be. If I ever feel like I'm getting tired, I'll slow down. But right now, it's not a problem. And I have people asking when's the next book going to be out, and I'm working on it. And then, my other problem is I get distracted by bright shiny things, and I always want to start a new series. So of course, I'm also launching a new series in February because I don't have enough going on.
Yeah, I know about that just a little bit. As far as I noticed that some of your books, your book ones, are perma-free. How does that play into your strategy? Is that something you've done from the beginning, and how well does that help with the book sales?
It's not something I've done from the beginning. It's something I tried after hearing other people saying they had success with it. I always wait until I have at least 3 books in a series before I'll put one perma-free. And I don't do a huge amount of promoting with them. I mean, with Dark Angel, which is the first book of which is the Cleopatra Hill series, that really took off because of being in this box set that Adam put together through Frostbite Press, and that has just been an amazing marketing tool for everybody in the set, really, because it's been able to get on in front of so many more eyes than just a single book. But otherwise, I've never done. I do smaller promotions for the perma-free books. Like I've used BK Nights, and I've used Free Booksy, and I've used Free Kindle Books and Tips, and e-reader News Today. I've used BookBub, but only for 99¢. I haven't actually used it for perma-free.
All right, I was actually going to ask you about that bundle next because Adam was talking about it a week or two ago and saying because you're first in there that you've been getting the most loving in the sell-throughs.
I can't complain. It's really, I mean, it's been almost life-changing because I was at the point where my book sales were good, definitely good enough for me to have gone full-time, but all of a sudden that pushed things to, like I said, just a different level that I really, frankly, wasn't expecting. And I'm really, really grateful for having that opportunity to be in that box set because, it's been in the Amazon top 100 almost since it came out in October. And, I don't even know how many downloads it is now, but I know it's a lot.
Right, and you guys decided to go with perma-free on the box set instead of a lot of people are doing 99¢. Why did you guys decide to go with free? And it definitely seems to be working for you.
Well, I'll let Adam answer that one because that was his decision. And actually, frankly, I didn't even, when he first announced that he was doing it, to me it sounded more like he was interested in urban fantasy rather than paranormal romance, and so that's why I didn't at first even approach him with Dark Angel because it is a romance, although it's not till the later books in the series that it gets steamy. So there's nothing really in it that would be objectionable for anybody of any age group, and I know he was trying to keep it PG, but as in terms of why perma-free rather than 99¢, I'm not sure.
Adam, can I have you ask a question? I got the UPS guy and the dogs are going crazy.
Yeah, no problem. I'll explain really quick. So I had talked a little bit about it in our first episode. If anyone wants to go back, I talked about the box set quite a bit on thewritingpodcast.com/1. But basically, box sets had kind of, I wouldn't say run their course because a lot of them are still doing really well, but paid ones, the 99¢one, it seemed like there was a new one coming out every day, and they were everywhere. And I hadn't seen one for free, and I knew perma-free worked really well. in a series. So why not do it that way? I made sure I marked it as $9.99, so it really looked to people like they were getting a huge deal. And maybe some of them would even download it just because, hey, I have to get this. It's $10, so maybe it's marked down to free for no on accident or something. So I really need to grab this. But it's definitely worked out. It's done what I expected to, but it's also done much more than that. It's I just checked because you were asking for numbers. It's been out for almost 3 months now, and it's still getting around 2,000 to 3,000 downloads a day. And
Wow.
yeah, and part of that, one of the great things that I mentioned on the first show, is that we have a really good group of authors too. I know you watched the page that we made for it, and there's a few authors on there that have really kind of taken the promotional portion of it by the reins, and then kind of divvy out what to do for each person, which works out really well. Christine actually also, I formatted the original book, and then she took that and formatted it and put it directly on some other retailers recently. So I don't have the free numbers for those ones. The 2,000 to 3,000 a day is just on Amazon. The Google Play books gets about that to 15 to 2,000 a day.
Yeah, iBooks is not. It's been averaging about 200 a day, give or take, since it went up there. I don't have the numbers for Barnes & Noble because it's through Drafted Digital, and I don't get numbers on freebies, and I haven't checked Kobo for a while because it's lagging so far behind everybody else. But it still helped pick up my numbers at Kobo, which were just like barely non-existent, and it's things have definitely changed over there too. So.
All right, popping back in here with 2 new packages, guys. I know you were excited about that. I was kind of wondering, since you're doing, I don't know, I'd say it's kind of a smaller niche. Do you have any trouble with buying like the advertisements? I've looked at BookBub for the pen name, and I think, well, these aren't really romances, or they are, but they're not going to appeal to most romance readers. And with the science fiction, I'm like, well, half the readers at least are going to be guys, and they're probably going to be disappointed if there's all this ooey gooey romance stuff in there. Do you find it hard to find advertisers that will fit well?
I really haven't had that problem. BookBub, I did both of my BookBub ads I did with the same book, with Dragon Rose, which is fantasy romance, and it's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. And I approached them to have it advertised in the fantasy category, and both times they took it. And I didn't worry about that too much because I figured from the cover and from the blurb, it was really obvious that this was not sword and sorcery, this was not epic fantasy, this is a personal love story. It just happens to be set in a fantasy world, and both times it did really well. It actually exceeded what their range was for that category in terms of typical sales. So I felt like I didn't want to put it in romance because there wasn't really a fantasy romance category, and it certainly isn't contemporary, and it's not paranormal, and so I thought so many fantasy readers are women that it would still resonate with them, even if they're not typically romance readers. Although I've found from talking to people who read romance and people who write romance, there isn't really a typical romance reader these days. They're just a group of diverse and amazing people.
Yeah, I've actually been surprised. I did a perma-free with the first science fiction romance to kick things off, and I told them in the back, I was like, if you send me a link to a review, I'll send you the next one free. And I'd say at least a third of the people that have emailed have been guys, and I was just shocked because I was like, no way is a guy going to pick up these loving couple on the cover, even if there are stars in space stations. So.
It's fun. I know. I'd say most of my readers are women, but I have, I get emails from guys, and they don't seem to have a problem with it. So I guess it's okay to have some kissy facing with the spaceships and the shooting at each other too.
Sure. Hey, space offers lots of action, no matter what. Anybody can like that. But what do you do for, you kind of mentioned having a mailing list. Do you just kind of point people to your website? Do you give away any freebies or anything as incentives for them to sign up?
I don't. I've been thinking about it, but I'm trying to figure out what the best thing, because the thing is, since I write in so many different subcategories of romance, it's like having one single thing that I could just give away to everybody may not work if they're signing up from a link in the back of one of my science fiction romance books as opposed to my paranormal romance. They may not care about a short story about two of the characters from the Witches of Cleopatra Hill series or whatever. So right now I have a link on my website and I have a link in the back of every single book of mine, which I realized I've been using Tiny Letter, which is really simple and basic and easy to use, but I'm going to have to upgrade to MailChimp really soon because the list is getting too big. And I'm like, oh no, I have to go back into all of these books on all of these different vendors and change the links in every single book. And that's the part where having a big backlist can, be a mixed blessing, I guess.
Yeah,
But
I
it's
definitely.
worked.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have books that I published first off in 2011 that, they still have a book list of only like 3 books available because I'm too lazy to go back and
Oh, I
update
know.
that.
And I'll always try to like update the ones that are in the same subcategory. Like if I have a new paranormal romance, I try to update all of those. But I'll admit I am really lazy about putting that new information in the back of the fantasy romances or the science fiction romances because I'm like, I know there's some crossover, but again, like I said to Adam, there's only so many hours in the day, and it's faster now because I do my ebook formatting in Vellum, which is a lovely, lovely program, and it makes it a lot easier to update store links and that sort of thing. But it's still time consuming.
Yeah, I finally got smart, at least for myself, in that I just put the link to my website where all the books are listed in the back. So now I only have to update the website, which I don't always remember to do, but at least there's not out-of-date stuff in there. But okay, my next question was, you kind of mentioned being on Facebook. What all do you do for social media, and is it more about connecting with fans, or are you trying to get new readers through any of the platforms?
I am mostly active on Facebook. I'll admit that Twitter just sort of bewilders me. It moves so fast, and I just, I've tried it, but what I have right now is my Facebook account, my fan page set up to just whatever I post on there gets pushed automatically to Twitter. So at least there's stuff showing up on Twitter, even if I'm not directly, writing a tweet. On Facebook, I do Facebook advertising at a really low level to get likes and and then when I have new releases and stuff, I do boost my posts. And I know some people say that doesn't work, but I've had a pretty good result from it. I mean, I've seen spikes in sales on the days that I've done that. So for me anyway, it has worked. I don't throw the maximum at it with every single one I want to promote or anything, but it helps get the word out. And I've met so many great people through my fan page. I have some great fans who will just go in and like and comment on almost everything and get good feedback from them, and I can ask questions and they'll respond. And when I was doing a research trip to New Mexico, I had somebody like who also lived in northern New Mexico giving me pointers on where to go out to eat and everything, and it's a really fun place for me to interact with readers. It's really low key. I try to post something every day. I don't always. If I don't have anything that's at least I think of some sort of interest, I don't, like say, oh, my dog did this today. I don't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've definitely had the same experience with Facebook, and even with traveling, I've actually had like tour guides, just people volunteer. Oh, you're in Las Vegas, let me show you around. So it's been really cool. It sounds like you do the boosted posts, but you haven't maybe done the paying for pay-per-click advertising. Have you tried that at all?
I tried it one time, and I think it did okay, but I haven't had a chance to really go back and revisit it, and I want to try that. I want to set up some new campaigns. One thing that frustrated me a little, just because I'm a person who gets like I like to do it this way, and I like this browser, and I have to go into Google Chrome to like use their power editor because they won't play nice with Firefox or whatever. And I'm like, really? And that's just my mental block. I need to get over that. And again, one of the things that I'm trying to resolve to do more of this year is to do more structured, targeted advertising and try some of those. I'm in a couple of private Facebook groups for indie authors, and I've gotten some really good pointers from people there on how they've managed to make that work. And so I'm going to start applying that and see how it goes.
Yeah, it seems like you've done the most important thing, which is get a big backlist of books out there. And I always say, you can promote them anytime, but it gets so much easier once you have more books out there to play with. So.
It does, especially now that my series all have a good number of books in them. They all have at least 4 or 5 books in them. So that means if somebody discovers it for the first time, they've got other things to jump to. And I think that is where you see your baseline of sales every month going up a little bit. I mean, I am not one of these huge superstars who broke out at all. I was like the little slow, steady tortoise, just sort of adding books, one at a time, and then eventually it got to a point where it was all of a sudden, oh, okay, I can make this be my, career.
Right, I think that's how it is for most of us. I mean, we all kind of hope we're going to have that one bestseller, but it is nice that with self-publishing now it is actually possible to be kind of a mid-list author and make a living doing it.
Exactly, and it was funny because I was talking to my dad around Christmas, and he was asking, how things were going. I'm like, oh, they're going great, and he's like, oh, you're going to be on a New York Times bestseller. I'm like, no, I'm not, Dad. And I said, you know what? I don't think I really want to be. I mean, I know people who are selling at that level, and there's a lot of pressure. I like some pressure, but too much pressure can make it harder to write joyfully, which is what I try to do.
All right, well, it sounds like a good strategy. And I think that when in these smaller niches, like I actually don't know very many authors at all that do kind of the high fantasy or secondary world romance, that, you have these readers that are really hungry for good books because there's just not that much out there. So I think that can be the big fish, little pond strategy can
exactly
work.
And it's, with those, and the same thing with my science fiction romances, I just wrote books that were books I wanted to read, or books that I wished I could have read when I was really reading voraciously, and there just didn't seem to be a lot of them out there. There are a few standouts that I loved and reread over and over again. But I think you're right. There are people who are hungry for that stuff, and there isn't a heck of a lot of it. So it's fun to write in those little niches.
Definitely. I was curious, now that you've kind of had more success with your Cleopatra Hill, are you more tempted to maybe stick with that one's paranormal romance? Is it to kind of?
What I have in my head going forward is more paranormal romance for a couple of reasons. It's a heck of a lot of fun to write. I love writing those books, and I have ideas for new series. Like the new series I'm launching in February is also paranormal romance. It's just very different from that one, even though it's still set in the Southwest. But I like to set things in places that aren't as typical, and are also places where I can easily go research them. I like to go places in person. Like the Cleopatra Hill books, they're set in Jerome and Sedona and Flagstaff, so it's stuff that's very real to me, and people have commented on that, how real it feels, so that's nice feedback. I don't have any plans to stop writing the other series. I just probably will be doing a book a year for those instead of 2. But at this point, I'm not planning to stop writing them. at least for the next year.
Sure, and it's nice that when you have a number of series out like that, maybe one has potential to take off, and you never would have known if you hadn't tried several different things which one had the most potential to, become a good seller for you. So.
Exactly. And I know some people say, well, you should just focus on one, and I maybe I could see that if I had a work situation where I just couldn't write as much as I do now, but because I can write books quickly, it doesn't feel like I'm, I don't know, I hate to say the word wasting time, but people have said that. Don't you feel like you've wasted time if you've written a series that doesn't take off? I have one series that doesn't sell that well, and I adore it. And you know what? I'm going to finish it this year. It's got 4 books out, has 2 left, and I'm going to, I'll finish it this year and it'll be done. But I don't feel like I wasted time writing those books because I love them, and I can still keep writing the other ones. It's not like I'm making people wait a year for the next Cleopatra Hill book to come out. It'll be out in March, so.
It definitely helps if you're prolific, and it does only take a month or 2 to get a book out. I just have a couple more questions for you, and then I'm going to hand you back over to Adam. I was wondering, you mentioned with the first book, the sci-fi Beauty and the Beast one,
Mm-hmm.
you just kind of put it out there to see what would happen. What does a book launch look like for you now?
Now, well, I've just started doing pre-orders, which puts a certain kind of pressure on, but it takes another kind of pressure off because I'm not as worried on making sure it's out on all platforms at the and making sure it'll all be there because all that part of it's been done. So these days, if it is a pre-order book, I announce the pre-order. Usually when I announce a new release I put a couple things in my newsletter because I only send out newsletters with new releases and things. So I mentioned several different things in there because I don't like getting a ton of emails from one person, and they probably don't want a ton of emails from me. So I try to make them count. But when I'm launching a book and it's a pre-order, it's already been uploaded. I usually finish the print version about 3 days before the actual release date so I can get it through the CreateSpace approval process and all that. And then on release day, I usually announce it on my Facebook page, and I do a boosted post for that to make sure I get as many eyeballs as possible on it. And then the next day, I'll send out the email to the mail list so they're not all those sales aren't hitting on exactly the same day. I'm following that strategy that David, I'm probably going to pronounce his last name incorrectly, Gagarin, I don't know. And Let's Get Visible, he said, try to spread out your marketing efforts a little bit. And then I also update my website. Like if you go to my website, the first page it says new and notable, and that's where it has the new release information and the pre-order information or anything else. But I make sure that's updated, and then the rest of the week I just kind of let it go and see what happens. I might do a tweet here and there, but like I said, I don't use Twitter that much, and I don't do a lot of advertising with new books because they don't usually have a lot of reviews. I send out I've started doing ARCs, and I send those out about a week before the release date, and I just ask people if they could get the reviews up within a week of release, so they have about 2 weeks to read the book and review it.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to get those ads right at the beginning if they take 20 or 30 ads or something to get a book. I don't think I had like 100 on the one I submitted to BookBub, and they were still like, "Nah, we're not interested. Sorry."
I'm surprised by that, but with them, it's really hard to say sometimes what they're gonna accept and what they're, and sometimes I think it's just what they've already seen of a particular category or whatever. I don't know. But again, I've only tried them with the one book. And it did well both times, but I haven't tried with my science fiction romances and stuff because I don't have enough reviews either, and I don't actively chase reviews either, except for, asking if people could please leave them, because I think a lot of times they don't realize that it's really important from a promotion angle to have as many reviews and have a decent review average on your books, because you can't even buy advertising without it.
Yeah, and I've had luck with BookBub under my main name, the fantasy, but it was actually the science fiction romance under the pen name that I submitted. And, I've been on their list for a long time, and I can't really think of any time I've ever seen the smoochy people next to the space station, or, it's always usually space opera or dystopian. So.
It's true, because I'm on that list too, and I don't think I've ever seen anything, so maybe they just think it's not going to move enough copies or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's okay. They're pretty expensive. My last question for you is, it looks like you've kind of chosen to go wide to all the platforms with your books. Have you played around at all with KDP Select or been tempted to try Kindle Unlimited or anything this last year?
I used to actually have a strategy of releasing new titles in Select and using the free days to get reviews and so on, but I really don't like the terms of Kindle Unlimited, and so I have one novella in it just because it wasn't doing well on other platforms anyway, and it's not part of a series, so it's just sort of okay, I'll put this in here, maybe it'll drive some people to my other books or not, but I've heard from enough readers who have Nooks or like to read on their iPad or whatever, and so I just feel like at this point it's better for me to just release wide, even though it's more work. But I only write full-length novels, and I don't feel that the terms of KU are at all good for people who write full-length books right now, so not using it.
All right, guys, you heard it here first that it is possible to be a full-time author without BookBub ads, or not many, and without being in KDP Select. So with that, I'm going to hand you back to Adam, and he'll probably finish things off here.
Thank you.
All right, so yeah, I had just a couple questions that came up. Let me read them off here. So earlier on, you said that you have some series that maybe not doing as well as the ones with the cliffhanger endings, but you have some that no matter which book you read, they can kind of stand alone. So have you played with marketing or advertising ones that aren't the first in those series, and if so, how did that do?
I really haven't. Now, technically, Dragon Rose is not the first in the Tales of the Latter Kingdoms, the fantasy romance books. But because it can be read separately from the other ones, it didn't really matter. And part of the reason why that's the only one I tried for BookBub was that I thought because it was a Beauty and the Beast story, it would have a lot more universal appeal and it would be more likely for them to pick up. So that's basically why I did it with that one. Otherwise, I just market my first in the free, in series, and I may, in this year, try doing, instead of a free lead into a series, doing 99 cent and see how that works. I'm going to try a couple different strategies and see what works.
And also, wanted to ask you about pricing. So when I was looking through your books, I noticed that you mostly do $3.99. Is that right?
Yeah, my pricing strategy is just based on length, pretty much, except if it's a new release. What I started doing with my new releases, just to kind of say thank you to people who buy it early, whether through the mailing list or the Facebook ads or whatever, is I put them at $2.99 instead of $3.99 for the first month, and that way you can save a little bit, but it's still priced, I think, fairly for a full-length book, because except for 2 novellas, everything I have is 60,000 words and up, and they're usually, and even the 60,000 word and 70,000 word ones are outliers. They're mostly between 80,000 and 100,000 words.
So would that have you played with different pricings in the past, or have you pretty much been $3.99 is the limit, the highest that you've went so far?
I do. I have a couple books that are $4.99 because they're over 100,000 words. But the other ones are all $3.99, and I haven't played around that much except if I'm doing a promo. Like Dragon Rose is usually $3.99, but it was 99 cents for those 2 BookBub ads. And right now, I have a new release in my Sedona Files series. Book 1 of that is perma-free, but then I put books 2 and 3 at 99 cents for a limited time, just to, just kind of say, hey, there's a new book in this series, and if you want to give them a try, you can get the first 3 for less than $2, since the first one's free anyway. And just things like that. But in general, I don't mess around with my pricing very much. And I've heard some people say, well, I know some people will eventually have, all their books free at some point. I'm like, no, with mine, they won't be, and they won't be 99 cents either. They'll be, there's a possibility of a perma-free lead into a series or 99 cents, but the rest of them are going to be full price, except for very, very short sale periods, if that.
All right, perfect. And I know these questions are kind of all over the place, all over the different topics. They're all things that came up during, the rest of the show. So the next one is, you said that although, you're prolific, you release a lot of books a year, series books, you actually wait before you put it out. You don't write in the same series and put, book 1, 2, 3, 4 in the same series out right away. Have you tried that at all, or have you always just done where you put out a book from a series and then you go back to another series and keep juggling it around?
Yeah, I have. Even when I was writing the Witches of Cleopatra Hill books, which are the first ones that I released pretty close to one another, they were like April, June, and August releases. I still wrote things in between in other series, just to keep things moving. And again, it's like that way, especially when you're starting a new series. Even if you've had a modest success before, you don't know if that's gonna take off, if people are gonna like it. Even the witch books, I got really good feedback from my beta readers. So I had a feeling that people were gonna like them, but you never know. And so if you have an ongoing series that does pretty well for you, then it just makes sense to write one of those in between the other ones. And that's kind of my strategy this year. It's like, I'm not going to write with this new series, I'm not going to write all 3 books at once. I mean, book 1's obviously done because it's on pre-order. But, and I'm about to start writing book 2 this weekend. And I'll do the same thing with that. Those will be every other month, with other books from other series coming in between them.
Okay, and so, like you said, it's only a couple months that someone has to wait before they get to read the next one in the series that they're following. So it's not like you're waiting a year.
With the cliffhangery ones, yeah. With the science fiction romance and the fantasy romance books, those are longer waits because I'm actually planning writing one of them each this year.
Right, and one thing, again, completely different topic that I forgot to ask in the writing section is, so we talked a bit in our last interview about editing as well. Did you get your books professionally edited right off the bat, or do you do that now? Like, what does the editing process look like for you?
Well, my situation's a little unique because I've been a professional copy editor for 20 years, so when I first started out, I completely self-edited my own books, and now what I do is I edit as I go because it makes my second pass go a lot more quickly, and I tend to write my first draft kind of lean, so I add when my second draft isn't cutting things usually, it's adding things, and after that draft, I'll read through it one more time, and then it goes to my beta readers, and then when I get it back from beta readers, then it goes to an actual editor. And then when she's done with it, I output a Mobi. I use Scrivener to write in, And so I output a movie file from that, and I read it through in my Kindle app. So that's a really good way for me to spot mistakes. Usually it's things like missing words or duplicated words or things like that. And that's kind of my last pass. And then finally, after I'm done with that, I output a docx that I can import into Vellum for the ebook formatting and to use to roll into InDesign for the print.
Okay, and I figured I would ask because my company, 2 different beta readers from that have read some of your books, or beta read some of your books. They usually seem to say that they're pretty clean as far as that kind of editing, like proofreading type stuff. So I really wanted to ask what you do ahead of that, so ahead of the beta readers. So.
Well, like I said, I do I do a little bit of editing every day, because I read the previous day's work, and if I find bobbles there, I'll edit there, and then I'll do a whole read through of the whole piece after the second draft's done before it goes to beta readers. So yeah, by that point, because I am an editor, it's pretty clean. But you always miss things in your own work because that's where I'm bad about, like missing a the or a of or an and or something.
Right. I don't know what it is, how we miss those things, no matter how many times you go over it. So I had someone read something of mine that I've been working on the other day. Like, I just sent them a sample chapter, and I swear I had edited it like 6 times, and I had used like 10 words incorrectly throughout the whole thing, like just homonyms, It's like, oh man, how does this happen? But
it happens, and it's like, and even when people look, I had somebody point out it was a silly mistake and I fixed it, but somebody pointed out a mistake in Dark Angel where I used a name wrong. And it's like, I didn't catch it, 3 beta readers and an editor didn't catch it. So, we're all just human beings. We do the best we can.
I remember, I think you're talking about Erin, she told me that too, so. She's like, it was pretty clean, but she used a name wrong a couple times. Like, oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, last question for you. So we know now, I've talked about it in the first episode, you talked about the box set a bit, connecting with other authors to promote in that capacity. Is that the first time that you've connected with other authors to do things like mailing lists or box set or anything, or do you connect with other authors for other reasons to help each other out?
It's definitely the first box set I've been in, and it's been a great experience, so I'm hoping to continue to do that for as long as people are interested in either downloading them for free or buying them for 99 cents or whatever the terms of the box set are. I'm in a couple of private Facebook groups for authors that I was invited to, and they've been just invaluable in getting inside information about marketing and sometimes just silly things like, how did you deal with when a reader said this, how did you handle it, things like that, things that you may not really want to be public discourse, but the things that are really important to talk to other writers about, people who've been in that same situation. So that's been really, really great because, as we all know, writing is a really, really solitary occupation. You're just in there with your computer, and if you're me, you've got your headphones on, and you're like, blocking out the world while you write. And so having places where you can go and talk to other people who are going through the same struggles and like, oh God, there's this Kindle Unlimited thing, how are you handling it, and everybody has different input, but everybody's always very respectful of other people's experiences and everything, so that's a really great way to interact when you're scattered all over, not just the country, but the world.
Awesome, yeah, and in my experience and talking to other people as well, it's one of the most important things that I've come across is just, like you said, interacting with other authors or connecting with them, especially if you can find authors that are around the same, I guess it doesn't really matter on author as an author, but around the same level, it's always nice to work together, try to figure things out, I found. So, of course, it always helps when you're talking privately with someone that is a big seller that can kind of mentor you a little bit. But
exactly.
Yeah. So, all right, that is all I had. Lindsay, did you think of any more questions while you were listening to us just then, or are you done as well?
No, we've had her on here for over an hour, so we should probably let her escape or something. But hey, if you ever want to do If you ever want to do a science fiction romance a bundle, look me up or look up my pen name. I'll tell you who that is.
Absolutely, because I think they're great, and it's funny because just to go off on the science fiction romance thing really briefly, is that I hear readers say, I wish there was more of it. So I don't know if it's just hard to get the word out, or I don't know. And I had someone say the nicest thing in a review on my latest one, that she'd forgotten how much fun it was to read a good science fiction romance novel, and so I'm like, well, there's a lot of them out there. I mean, I see them when I go, check to see how my book's doing, or even just see them in the also bought. So I don't know if it's a visibility thing or what it is, but I'd love to do more to get that stuff out there because it is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've had good luck so far with the pen name, but I released 4 books in like less than 4 months, so I think that really helped get things started. And I do think the space opera is a really small sub niche too of science fiction romance. I keep seeing these ones where some chick gets kidnapped from Earth and is sold into slavery to aliens
Right.
or something.
Yeah.
And these stupid things sell like crazy. I'm like, what the heck? What's wrong with people?
Yeah, mine are definitely space opera romance. So that is, yeah, it's a small niche.
Oh, and by the way, next week we'll have on an author who writes those kidnapped by slavers stories. No, I don't know, but it's been great talking to you, and I appreciate you answering our questions.
Well, thank you so much for having me on here. It's been a lot of fun.
No problem. Before you go, can you let everyone know where best to find you? Website, social media?
It's really easy to find me on christinepope.com, and then right there on my homepage are the little icons for Facebook and Twitter, and I'm also on Pinterest, although I've been really lax about updating my boards there because I've been really busy. But on Facebook, it's Christine Pope Author.
All right, awesome. And so you were just talking, Lindsay, about those little niche genres. That made me think really quick before we go. I don't know if you saw, but maybe a month or two ago, someone wrote kind of jokingly a book about an alien that was Scottish, and it was like tentacle.
Oh, yeah.
And they sold like hundreds of copies of it, and I was like, oh my god. What?
What's really funny about that is a friend of mine saw that, but I don't know how she trolls Amazon, but she saw it and she sent me the link, and I'm like, oh yeah, she's on Kindle books. And she started laughing. She's like, is everybody on K-Words? I'm like, well, the fun people, I don't know.
Yeah, why are we writing these 90,000 word things when I can just throw up, Scottish tentacle erotica? But no.
It's okay. It's room for everybody.
All right, so that's it for the show. Everyone listening, want to let you know I had a lot of emails and messages about getting the show up on iTunes, so it is up on iTunes now. The first 2 episodes are up already. The third one and this one will be live over the weekend. And at the moment, the fastest way to get there is to either search for us, The Writing Podcast, on iTunes, or go to our website, thewritingpodcast.com. It's on the sidebar. Also, over the weekend, I'm going to make a short link to it, so you can just go to thewritingpodcast.com/iTunes. So, as well, there's a feed on the site now, an RSS feed, where you can subscribe or download the audio files in case you listen to the audio while you're out, but you don't have iTunes, or you're one of those Apple hater people. So there's a ways for you now to listen to just the audio, so you don't have to sit and watch us. So hopefully everyone enjoys that, and we'll see you back next week at the same time. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.